I think religion is lovely on paper, but unfortunately people have tarnished.
People have abused religion. I agree with you.
Yeah, and it is brought too much hate. I can't agree with that.
Sure. So what we see in reality is people go by the religious affiliations and yet they commit so much atrocity, so much oppression on earth, right? I agree with you. And that's why, because there are some people who use religion as a tool to oppress people rather than actually following the dictates of religion. For example, to give you a clear example, have you heard of child grooming?
Yes.
Yeah. It happened in UK. A lot of people got arrested.
Yes.
And people tried to make that into an Islamic thing. Oh, Islamic grooming gang.
Yeah, I don't agree with that.
Right. But do you know what Islam says about grooming or married outside sex or having fornication and adultery?
Well, it's not allowed.
It's not allowed.
Yeah.
So, of course, it's not an Islamic thing. It's a thing where some people are taking on their own hands, either because of their greed or lust or desires, whatever it might be, and because they may be coming from a particular faith already, because of this is how they were born into, or they believed in that faith, it's associated with it when it has nothing to do with it.
Yes.
So now we realize that even some things which are not Islamic in principle, Islam can be blamed for it.
Yeah.
Blamed for it. So we need to differentiate from this clear example, what is the dictates or message of the religion as opposed to the people's practices? Are they following what the religion commands them to do, or are they following their own desires? And because of that, they're committing oppression and injustice on this earth. Do you agree?
I agree with you completely.
Yeah. So it's not that means, Mary, you're not someone who's necessarily disagreeing with religion. You are actually disagreeing with
the interpretation of religion.
That's not even an interpretation, though, because
a lot of people will
take that example.
Interpret religion based on their own needs and wants.
Sure. This is partly true, but the example that we brought forward now about child grooming, they know blatantly in black and white this is not allowed from the said God.
Yeah, but
so
I
it's
think
not,
that's not a religious thing. It's black and white is not.
Yeah.
You cannot do that.
So it's not about interpretation of the text, because the text is totally against it anyway, right?
But yeah.
So if we were to delve quite deep and delve further into many of the practices people do, you can differentiate what is based on religion and what is based on their own wishes and dictates. Yeah. So in many ways we have the same understanding. Okay. So it is not like some people might immediately think like you're against religion. I would say no.
No, I think religion is a beautiful thing on paper. It is a beautiful thing. Again, it makes me sad because there's so much hate around religion, about Christianity and Islam, and I don't agree with hate. I don't care where someone's from. I don't care what their religion is. I don't care what they look like. We were put on this earth to work together, to love each other, regardless to differences.
Yeah. So,
and that's why I struggle with following a religion, because.
So we will talk about in terms of why there are many religions, and should there be many or should there be one in a moment. So let's park this. Yeah. And then that will actually help us, or help you rather in this case, to come to realization why this is a problem in the beginning and how we can solve this issue. But I want to just focus on this issue about what Islam says about people's perspectives of things, or rather Islam says about differences within people. People may be different because of their language, of their race, the ethnicity, the geographical location, whether they're rich or poor. Islam says God has created man and women, created human beings rather, He created us in different languages and colors, not that we despise with each other, but we recognize with each other. And the most honorable in the sight of God is the one who is most God conscious. There's two important key messages here. There is no distinction between you and me because you are white and I am black, for example, or you're rich and I am poor, okay? Or you speak English and I speak Hindi or Japanese, whatever it might be. There's no distinction in terms of our grade and our superiority. None of that. The only reasons why we are different in the form that we are, in our languages, in our colors, is actually a blessing from God. He's saying, okay, not that we despise of each other, saying, I'm going to put you down because you're white and you're going to put me down because I'm black, whatever it might be. There is no basis for that distinction. We are different like this so that we may recognize in each other. Now, I want you to reflect on this. Imagine every woman was exactly like beautiful as you are,
Thanks.
and the same color, the same shade, same complexion, everyone's the same. Your sister, you, your mother, your friend, everyone's the same. Now, I know your name is Mary. Who's the other person exactly like you? Is it Mary or someone? Because we cannot differentiate.
Exactly.
If everyone was the same, we would not be able to recognize with each other. The fact that God has created us in these different complexions and different ways and forms, and whether some people are tall and short, is something we can recognize with each other, Okay? So there's no blame in our differences like this. Now, God says within the same verse, finishing with this, the only person, the most noble among us, the most honorable among us, not only those who are rich, not only those who are somehow got degrees or whatever, but who are pious people, righteous people, the people who are God conscious. The people who are righteous and pious and God conscious are the ones who will be the most upright people. They will want to establish justice on earth. They want to establish peace on earth and so on. So, in essence, you would not...
that can be done without religion.
Yeah. Do you agree in principle this message is something that you can
100%,
agree with?
yeah.
Right. Okay. So, next thing is whether this can be done without religion or not. When we say there are many religions, this is what I want to talk about. Because you said you're not sure whether there's a creator or not, there's a God or not.
No. I
Because-
mean, none of us can ever be 100%
Yeah,
certain.
because you're not sure.
Yeah.
Now, suppose there is a God and God created us. How many gods would there be? Could there be more than
Another
one?
thing we have to wait and see. There could be more than
Could
one.
there be one? Okay, so let's talk about it. The concept of God that we have. He is the necessary being. Everything else is not necessary. We are contingent.
Yeah.
So we are all dependent. Every dependent things eventually has to depend on something which is independent. Okay? So our contingent reality demonstrates that there has to be something that is necessary for our universe's existence, a cause which all this contingent being depends on, and that cause will be the necessary existence. So using logic and rationality, we can come to this conclusion. Whether you are the staunchest atheist on planet Earth, you can still understand the reason behind it.
Yeah.
So if there is a necessary being, the necessary being will be perfect, free from any defect and imperfections and deficiencies. Because if there's any deficiencies and so on, you will say, where does these deficiencies come from? Because weakness and deficiencies is for something that is put a limit to. Everything else, if this dependent, must by reason depend on something is independent. Otherwise it doesn't solve the problem. And it has to. So if there is an independent being, that means the independent being has to be self-sufficient, not dependent on anything. And self-sufficiency is perfection, because you are not in any way dependent on anyone for anything. So if you possess power and energy, because that's what you need to create, because we are here, the creator, this being, would be all-powerful with no limits in power and energy. So we'll be free from any defect in having this ability. So every other attribute the creator will have, and some of the things you can come to conclusion using reason alone, in terms of that this being, necessary being, also possesses a will, the attributes of exercising the choice to bring about this universe. Otherwise this universe would not proceed. It's like you're in a kitchen, so tidy and everything is in the right place. You have the milk in the fridge, you have the sink with the tap, and you have the tea bags rightly there, exactly in the cupboard, and you have the cups there, and you sit there, and no cup of tea or coffee will ever be produced if you just sit there and wait it to happen, because it needs someone intend to make it. Okay, our universe, if it was not intended to be in this way it is, it will never proceed. Okay, so you can realize that there is a necessary being who possesses an attributes of will, and when you give an attribute of will to a necessary being, that demonstrate awareness, self-awareness, choice and self-awareness, that being will be someone who is conscious, someone who will be living. So many attributes, you will come to the conclusion about our creator. There cannot be more than one of such a creator, such a being. It is not reasonable to even conclude the existence and possibility of more than one absolutes. Someone who is absolute, all-powerful, self-sufficient. It simply doesn't make sense. Just to give you an example of an absolute will. We are in a car, you are on the driving wheel, and the same car has another driving wheel, all the steering and all the controls. Now you want to take the car to north. I want to take the car to south. Now I'm not going to listen to you because I'm independent. I have my own choice. I have my own will. Where's the car going to go?
Yeah, I agree. I agree
Yeah.
with you.
So even using these examples like this, we can understand that there cannot be two absolutes because there will be conflict of will. And conflict of will mean the universe will be in a disaster. The fact that the universe is in this harmony, in this organization that we see, there are universal constants. So accurate to certain 22 or so even more decimal places. That's how precise the universe is constructed, demonstrating the organizational will of one being. Okay? So we cannot have more than one. If we have one being only, which makes sense, that anything that comes from this one being in terms of religion, which is meant to be the guidance for people, how you construct your life, how you live a life, the code of conduct, that will be consistent throughout. So there should not be a religion which says, you do this and you do that, you despise the old people and the disabled and so on, and you kill them and get rid of them because they are the burden to society. Another community says in another religion, you look after them, you care for them. You cannot have that if it's from the same one being. These kind of things will not be in existence. So the fact that we have one creator means there will be one way of life instructed to us to live our life. That is what Islam teaches. Okay? So why do we have so many religions conflicting and saying different things? Some of them even having this belief like, wipe them out from this planet Earth because they are this and what, right?
Yeah, this is the issues that
We say Islamically, I understand, we say Islamically, our creator revealed the guidance, this same consistent guidance, to be applied by the people through prophets and messengers.
Yeah.
But what happened is, as time went, people corrupted these messages.
Yes.
They failed to keep it pristine, clear, and preserve it. They failed to preserve it. And because of this, the message got corrupted, diluted, embellished, and so on and so forth. And that's why you have all of these problems that we see, because it is not the true message from God. So we say God, our creator, when we say God, is a being who is worthy of worship. That's simply what God means, a being that deserves our worship, our gratitude. I mean, if, for example, you did something to someone, it is not because you did it because of something. That person, knowing that you've done that out of your kindness, your compassion, they will thank you for it. That thankfulness, that gratitude they're offering you is what they need to do, not what you want from them. Okay? So that's their gratitude. We have to worship God because we need to worship God, not because He needs our worship.
I don't think we was created to worship.
Okay. Our Creator tells us that we were created for a purpose, to acknowledge Him and to be grateful to Him. And that essence of gratitude.
But that's the bit I don't.
Fine, we can discuss
that.
that. I know, I understand.
Agree that we was created the same way every other animal was created. We was created to live. We have moral compasses within us, whether the Creator gave that to us, whether an energy, whatever higher being is, we was created to be good and bad and live our lives, not to live by rules and regulations.
What if you follow what is good and avoid what is bad and you live your life? Are you following something?
Maybe I am.
Because when you're following something good, you are following. So you have a code of conduct, code of life.
Yeah, but I don't agree with the rules and regulations
Do you agree that we need to live our life to the best for everyone, for me and for everyone else?
Yeah.
That means not harming others, not oppressing others, not being unjust to others.
Yes.
Now, suppose our Creator told us this is how we should live your life. Would you have a problem with that?
No, because I agree with that.
Yeah. So that's why when we say to live our life in a particular way of living, that is God's way for us to live, our Creator. So you're not against that, you're against a form of way of life which goes against perhaps what you consider to be good, what you consider to be right, what you consider to be correct. That is what we need to differentiate. So in essence, we don't disagree. We are disagreeing with that message out there which creates division, which creates enmity, hatred, bigotry, which creates between people this idea of tension and saying you are less than the other, they are better than you and so on. Islam says this is not the message of God. that is not the message of God.
Exactly,
The
yeah.
message of God exactly on the contrary, that God created you to live on this earth in peace and tranquility and to be established in justice on this earth. He says he created the balance, and he says do not transgress this balance.
And would it be a wonderful world if we could all do that?
Right. So as I can see, you agree in principle the essence of the teaching of Islam is to identify where is that message, because you see this message, remnants of it, part of it, here and there in different religions. We will say all of these belief concepts that we see around, we need to scrutinize and to find out which one is the clarity of message from our Creator, which you would be happy to follow. That is the role of the mind here, that we need to filter out the things, the religions, the ideologies, the belief system, and find out the one which is the one that I will, with my heart and mind, accept because I know it's the truth. So we need to have, firstly, number one, which you have already, the curiosity to know, to find out, love for the truth. Even if it was found in particular, say in Islam, for example, you would not make it into an obstacle. You will say, that doesn't bother me, just because the message came in Arabic, because it's the truth. Yeah. So our love for the truth should be prime here, and we need to have some methods to employ so that we don't fall into the error of feeling to reaching to the conclusion by our gut feeling or emotions. We need to remove our biases as much as we can. Everyone is biased. I am biased, you are biased. We might not even express that, but we are biased. It's very difficult to remove those biases. Yeah. In science, we try to eliminate bias as much as possible. Okay? We try to be impartial as much as possible. So we should have a methodology in which we will remove our biases and say, okay, I may be vegetarian, but that doesn't stop me from accepting if a religion, God says, I have made you food from...
Sorry, can you come inside, please? There's a block in the way. Come, it's okay.
Are you okay?
Yeah, it's okay.
That's fine. Like, I may be vegetarian, but if God created, other forms of creation which are living, like not plants only, and he says you can eat of them, which are pure and good for you, that shouldn't stop me from accepting this message because I'm a vegetarian, because that will be my bias coming into play.
Yeah. Cool.
Likewise, if I find that, my particular community is downgraded, that's not what it's called, is taken into account because what my community has done, that shouldn't stop me from saying, but the truth is truth. Yeah. Because whatever my community has done, God is showing his judgment on this community because what they have done wrong. Yeah. So me belonging in a particular community, say for example, I was a Jew, okay, and I was supposed to be the chosen one. And now if God says no, because of your transgression, the message has now gone to somewhere else because you did not fulfill the duties and responsibilities. Now God has given the burden of responsibility to another community who will dispose of that responsibility for the whole. That shouldn't stop you from accepting the truth because it's now gone to somewhere else. Yeah. So we want to eliminate all these biases, and if we do likewise, you will see the only truth is when you filter out all of them, and that will be Islam remaining on the table. Polytheism, you can discount it because polytheistic belief system cannot be from our one and only true creator, because there is only one creator. You can say this is a message that has been corrupted. So unless we can go deep down and filter it and uncover and rediscover what the truth is, you can't really follow it because you don't know what is true and what is falsehood.
Yeah.
So when we examine all of these things, we have to really understand now how are we going to verify which one indeed is the true messages of God. Okay? So, criteria again. What are we going to use? We can use falsification tests, can we not? If we apply that test and it fails, it cannot be from God. Yeah? In science,
Yeah, of course.
someone says, this is the experiment I did, and this is how you can prove me false, by not able to replicate it. I'm giving you all these methods. If you're not able to demonstrate that the results you get with the same methodology, then there's something wrong with my method and so on, or my conclusion is not valid. Because if my method is correct and you follow it, you should be able to replicate my result. Because I'm using, for example, if I put 2 spoons of sugar, the taste of that sweetness of it should be the same every time you put 2 sugars, right? But if it doesn't, there's something wrong. Maybe my spoon is bigger, like that big, and of course it's going to be extra sweet. So when we are going to examine the religion, we have to use this correct methodology and ask for falsification test. Now, Islam provides some falsification test I can share with you and say it makes sense or not. It says, if this book was from any other than God, then you will find within this book, Quran, many discrepancies and inconsistencies and contradictions. Now, I think that makes sense, because if a book came from the DawahWise, the creator of the heavens and the earth must know what he's created. He's not going to make a mistake of something about the reality and say, oh, and gets it wrong. He's not going to make a mistake and gets history wrong, what happened to history in the past, because he's supposed to be the ever-living, all-knowledgeable creator, knowing every single thing that happens. So if we find a book that talks about things and contradicts and brings errors within it, then you can say it's got corrupted, or it's not from God. Okay? And you can examine these books likewise. You can examine the Bible, you can examine the Bhagavad Gita, you can examine the books of the Buddhist scriptures, whatever that you fancy. And when you examine it, you can come to certain steps of realization of how true this is or not. So I'm going to give you some examples of a book that I'm not going to even mention the name of, first of all, right? Then you can appreciate how we can filter these things. If a book describes about our Creator, it must describe God in perfection.
Yeah.
Suppose this book says God was angry with people. He destroyed humankind once, and then he made a covenant with them. Said, you know what, next time I'm about to destroy mankind, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to make a covenant. I am going to put a rainbow in the clouds, and when I'm about to destroy mankind again, and I look at the clouds and see the rainbow, I will remember my covenant. So I won't destroy. Does that sound like a God who knows everything? He needs reminding by a rainbow.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah. And you know where this is coming from. You
Yes,
probably have
I
read
do.
it yourself.
A few times.
Yes. So this is what we were saying is descriptions like this, when we read it in a book, you can automatically say that doesn't resonate in my heart and my mind. It doesn't describe God in his perfection, because God is not like that. Someone who forgets, someone who's reminded by a rainbow. Look at the Quran, for example. I would urge you to investigate with the same mental, or mindset rather, and see how the Quran describes God and how it describes God in his perfection or not. That's one thing. And examine the Quran and see whether the Quran gets mistakes and errors, contradictions and discrepancies and inconsistencies. Because if the Quran withstands that test, then we should be asking ourselves, how is it that the Quran, given over a period of 23 years, spanning a period of 23 years, and talking about all these things about astrophysics and biology, about economics, sociology, anthropology, about predictions of the future, talking about the past nations and communities, and yet it doesn't somehow get any of these problems or mistakes and errors or discrepancy, then you have to think really seriously and say, is it possible that this is coming from the knowledge of God? That's what the Quran says. This has been revealed with the knowledge of God, as a revelation from the Almighty, All-Wise, okay, for the guidance of us. The Quran also gives another falsification test. It says, if you think it's not from God, produce something like it. A whole book, 10 chapters like it, or a single chapter like it.
Yeah.
A single chapter is like about 3 verses. Okay? It was a challenge given to the people who were the masters of Arabic language at that time, and it came to a person who wasn't even lettered. He was unlettered. He was known to be an unlettered person. So someone who came with a book in this linguistic excellence, because this is how even the critics of Islam will say this is a book of eloquence, how is it possible that they cannot even imitate something like it? Shakespeare can be imitated. So can be other poets and so on. Why is it impossible for the Quran to be imitated? This is something that for the last 1400 years Muslims have been asking this question to the non-Muslim critics who are knowledgeable, who are in the academia, who are professors in the universities. Okay, tell us, why are you unable to match the Quran? Sometimes people say, we are coming up with excuses and there. And some people say, here you go, we've matched it, not realizing what the Quran is to be matched on. The Quran says bring something like it, not unlike it, like it. Yeah. So you have to bring in the construction the Quran is in. This is the objective challenge, not a challenge of beauty and eloquence, as popularly understood. Because eloquence is subjective, isn't it?
Exactly.
Beauty is subjective. So the Quran is not talking about this. Quran is talking about, can you bring a better guidance than God? Can you bring the Quran in the way it is delivered and is constructed in objective way? So one can, in fact, academic studies have done and demonstrated this is the stylistics of the Quran. Because if you're a student of language, you will understand when we talk about stylistics, how a particular genre the Quran is, whether it is in this form, like in poetry, in Arabic poetry, they have several types. They call it the Cs, the Bihar, 16 types of poetry. Set forms.
Yeah.
So like al-khafif, al-madid, al-tawil, rajaz, and so on. So these are rhymes and meters, fixed. That's like, like for example, there's a fixed rhyme and meters. So if you're going to compose a poetry of this, it has to resonate like this, with rhymes and meters.
Yeah.
The Quran has its own rhyme and own meters. It's unlike any of them. So this is the Quranic challenge, bring something like it. Not any of the 16s, but like the Quran.
Yeah.
So the open challenge to the people who don't believe, because Quran says if you don't believe in the Quran, if you are doubtful that this is a revelation sent to his slave Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, produce a chapter like it, seek your helpers and supporters besides God. If you are truthful in your claim, if you're truthful in your doubt. So the Quran doesn't simply say, look, do it yourself, like Mary, you might not know Arabic. It puts you into some kind of, what's this word, like this, incapacity because you're not able to do it. The Quran doesn't stop you there from being just and says, look, no problem. Go and seek help and support from the people who can, people who know Arabic language. Okay, so that is the linguistic inimitability challenge of the Quran, to falsify it, to falsify the Quran.
Yeah.
Because if you are able to falsify it, bring something like it, then this is a human invention, because you can make something like it. But if you cannot, then you know that this is something that you have to now think about it. How is it impossible for me to imitate?
Yeah.
To give you an analogy from you see these constructions over there. This is how they're constructing the mold. They had this mold there, look like a mountain or a hill. Behind that is a building.